Sorry, I was confused what you were saying. Yeah, and also if people can move into the centre of the rows as well, it just makes it easier rather than people trying to pass through aisles. But yeah, if people can come in quickly, move to the centre of the rows, and also try to take their seats quickly.
How are you?
Yeah, very
How's
good.
things? How are you?
Very well.
So people sitting on all these or?
Jeffy at the end, and Amy's here with
Great. Jesse's here. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Dublin. Yeah. What? Very good. Very good. Good left wing tradition.
1 2 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1.
Over.
2 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1.
Why are they making
All right, now that we've got the centre filled, if people can take seats on either sides of the hall this way, and if people can move quickly as well, that would be good. So it's in, or is it like 5 digits?
basically, I'm not at home. Yeah, I'm not home. But she lives at she lives in East Ham, so it's not that far. So I'll just stay there. Yeah, I would do that. It's just like, well, it's up to you. Just say. And your friend that's with Kelly, I was just saying like out competing someone. Yeah, I would if I was going home. You know, like because I'm not. That's okay. No worries. Are you going to the festival? Yeah, I love it. Yeah. That's fine. Yes. Good luck with this. Actually, good luck. I'm not actually nervous about it. Maybe I should be. Everyone's saying good luck is making me feel like I should be. No, you shouldn't. That's good. Yeah. You've done this before. I think it's because I had like something I was more scared about. So now I'm like, now let's shit off. Yeah. You're fine. Alright. See you later. Bye. Yeah, no, I know about it. They're trying to. Well, I think but yeah.
All right, so if people can take a seat, we're going to be starting pretty soon. There's plenty of seats available, so if people can just very swiftly. All right, so I'll just wait for the last people to take their seats and we'll get going. Okay, well, a huge welcome to the closing rally of Marxism Festival 2023. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nadia. I work for the Socialist Workers' Party, and I'm a national organizer for the Socialist Workers' Party, and I'll be chairing the closing rally today. But hopefully people have enjoyed the last 4 days or however long you've been at Marxism for. Hopefully people have enjoyed the festival. And I'm really happy to say that it's actually been the biggest Marxism festival for at least a decade, with over 4,000 tickets sold. So to finish what has been an absolutely fantastic event, we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers who I'll introduce as they come up. And I'd like to introduce first. Down a bit. I'd like to introduce first Kevin Biederman. First, I think it's important to say strikes have been a key theme of the festival, and we're actually delighted to be kicking off the closing rally by hearing from another striker. Oh, actually, sorry, the order's changed, so we'll hear from Kevin later. I'm going to bring in. I forgot about that. We're going to hear first from Luna, who's come all the way from France. I mean, I'm sure people have seen the scenes in France. People would have seen the scenes in France where there have been riots and protests in response to the murder of a 17-year-old at the hands of the police. And I'm sure everyone in the room sends out solidarity to those in France protesting against police racism and the French state. Now, Luna is a member of Autonomie de Classe, the sister organization of the Socialist Workers' Party. So a massive, massive welcome to Luna. Hello. Hello. Dear comrades, first, thank you for the invitation and this amazing 4 days of festival. Today I'm here because the France is on fire, and so do we. Nahel, a 17-year-old boy, has been killed by the police 5 days ago in Nanterre, a suburb of Paris. As you all must know, this is a horrible but not an exceptional fact. As in France, like in the US, or like here, the police kill and maim, and particularly kill Black and Arab or North African men. Since 2022, this is the 14th murder for a so-called refusal to comply. This is a systemic issue. These executions are regular and have only increased since 2017, with an article of law that expanded the framework of self-defense for the police. So why the country is on fire now? Why this time and not another? This tragic event comes after months of a huge social movement against pension reform, inflation, and the Macron government. A moment that reopened a situation of resistance, a movement which, despite the forced passage of the pension reform, is not a defeat, because it has restored confidence in our class and in our ability to organize. This movement continues today in a different form, and that's its legacy. Moreover, this murder comes at a time when the myth of the police has collapsed and all the violence committed during the movement has delegitimized them. The sequence of demonstrations that followed the death of George Floyd is still fresh in people's bodies, as is the Black Lives Matter movement. Also, just a few days before, the ruling class made us all very angry with another painfully cruel and cynical event, which was a difference in treatment between the boatload of refugees abandoned to die in the Mediterranean Sea and the human and financial resources deployed to save a few ultra-rich people in an over-curious submarine. So now Macron is scared. He promised us, or he promised himself, 100 days of appeasement. And it's been a bitter failure for him. The country is still more in crisis day after day. He now wants to cut off the internet and social networks in working-class neighborhoods. The government is trying to isolate the young people on the streets, prevent the organization, and undermine the link with the social movement. All the media are talking about, sorry. All the media are talking about the destruction of public services. And an important part of the left is indignant with them. They are scandalized by theft and treat them as if what is stolen does not belong to those who steal, as if it had nothing to do with months of mega inflation. This is about class struggle. We are talking about the theft of washing powder from Lidl stores. People just need to fill their fridge and make a decent living, and sometimes, why not a nice Lacoste polo shirt? Just during the riots on Friday night, the police arrested 1,311 people, 3,055 in 4 nights. Over 30% of them were minors, some of them very, very young, and these young people are being treated as pests. Since Nael's death, there have been 2 other deaths from the police, one in Cayenne in French Guiana, who took a stray bullet at his window, and in France, a 19-year-old who fell from a shopping mall during a riot. And we are still waiting news of the vital prognosis of a person who was shot in the temple with an LBD by the Red, and many other atrocities. The majority police unions have written an absolutely terrifying communique calling the young people hordes of savages and threatening the government with arms if its response is not up to scratch. The fascists are on the offensive, and we have to choose sides. So our big question now is, what is our role today as revolutionaries? First of all, we have to stand in active solidarity unconditionally, to stand alongside the part of our class which is in the streets, being there even if we don't have the same practices, that already express unconditional support. Anything that gives visibility to this is positive. Solidarity can take many forms with the militant tools at our disposal. We've got to make the case for this solidarity because 60% of people are currently in favor of the state of emergency, and that's no easy task. The French left is mostly racist, and there is a lot to build.
because the risk that this movement will not gain momentum if the left doesn't invest it and continues to hold stupid moral positions. The repression will only intensify until it extinguishes both the potential of this rebound and, above all, the bodies that are standing up for themselves. I need to go faster, so I just wanted to say that part of our class is currently opening up a wealth of possibilities and giving us the opportunity to build unity and autonomy in our class. I would like to quote Marcia Riggs, the justice campaigner who took part in the opening rally of this festival and who made this very powerful statement on Thursday. There is no justice, there is just us. And as long as there is no justice, there will be no peace. France is burning, and we must keep the fire alive and spread it until the victory.
No peace, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. A huge thank you, Luna. I thought that was quite a powerful start to the closing rally. Okay, now I'd like to bring in our second speaker. Rightly so, strikes have been a huge theme at Marxism Festival this year. And so I think it's only right that we end continuing on with that theme. And we've got Kevin Biederman, who is a member of the University of Brighton UCU branch, who are on all-out strike against mass redundancy. So a big welcome to Kevin.
All right, thanks everybody. And if France is on fire, then let's have the spark start something up here. So really, thanks for inviting us to this closing rally. So in May, we were told by our senior management team, our SMT, that 130 people would be made redundant. They wanted to save 7.3 million in academic costs, and there's a pool of 400 people. So the managers, they wanted us to be complicit in this. They wanted us to be complicit in throwing people out on the street when they've been working their hardest all the way through lockdown and after. Well, you know what we told them? Fuck right off. We don't want to see 130 redundancies. We don't want to see 100 redundancies. We don't want to see 50 redundancies. We don't want to see 25 redundancies, 10 redundancies, 1 redundancy. And I'll tell you, our branch has been incredible. They've stepped up. The union meetings have gone into the hundreds. There's fantastic solidarity there. And, you know, SMT, they want to save 7.3 million. But they spent 50 million on building projects in the last 2 years, right? New expensive buildings, they don't teach. They don't teach, right? And this is part of a plan to grow numbers. But you know, you don't have to be a genius to work out that 130 fewer lecturers and more students equals worse conditions for all. Now, our staff-student ratio, that's already one of the worst in the country, right? If anything, we need more staff, but instead, they're breaking the backbone of the institution, and that's us, right? What are SMT without us? Nothing but a badly organized managerial framework, right? It's our labor that keeps the uni going, right? And that's what management have forgotten. But you know who hasn't forgotten that? Our students. We had hundreds of them marching through the streets, calling for our vice chancellor to resign. Now, on the 25th of May, our students even occupied the VC's office with one demand: no redundancies. And they've been at the forefront of this battle because they know their learning conditions will be affected, right? They're saying fire management, not frontline staff. Let's throw them on the street and let's take the university back. So our university, they have 250 million in reserves. These redundancies are a choice, not a necessity. So what are our branch doing about it? Well, we had 2 weeks to organize a ballot. We did. We smashed that ballot, right? We have 90% in favor of striking on a 61% turnout. On Monday, we're taking indefinite action. And we've told everyone, we told the university managers, we've told our students now, and we've told the students coming in October that if SMT don't back down, there will be no beginning of the year. University of Brighton is closed. So just one final thing. Look, some of our members, because they've been on the national map as well, some people have got £23 in their pay packet this month, right? They haven't been paid all. So all I can say is solidarity, everyone. If you can, pass motions of support in your branches if you're in unions, or also, please donate to our hardship fund as well. You can find us on Brighton UCU. Solidarity, everyone.
Huge thanks, Kevin, and huge solidarity to Brighton UCU. And actually, obviously, we want to see more action like the action you are taking. Before I bring in our next speaker, I just wanted to make another announcement. We're delighted that Bookmarks Bookshop have sold £45,000 worth of books throughout the festival. If people don't know, Bookmarks are the best and biggest socialist bookshop in Britain, and they need your support to keep going. So if you can open an account with them, there should be leaflets outside of the hall, or even visit their store if you're here for a couple more days or live in London. But they do need your support, but it's fantastic. They've done so well through the festival. So to bring in our next speaker, we have Jechi Tano. Jechi is a socialist based in Ghana and is a member of the International Socialists, the sister organization of the Socialist Workers' Party. So a massive welcome to Jechi.
Thank you very much, comrades. And it's been a great Marxism. Well worth traveling, contributing to the depleting the carbon budget, traveling to come here. We'll replace it after the revolution, definitely. Comrades, but I'm not the threat to the world. Capitalism is. Because I think that it is fair to say now that capitalism today, here and now, is a clear and present danger, is an immediate existential threat to the lives of billions of people in the global south. Now, this might seem like an obvious statement to make in a room like this, but believe me, I don't think it's that obvious. It's not so long ago, as many of you might recall, that global newspaper and media headlines would say India rising, Africa rising, and so on and so forth. 6 or 7 or whatever of the fastest growing countries out of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world would probably always come from the global south, from places like Africa and so on. In other words, to the degree that capitalism continues to grow, profits continue to be made, the capitalist system is still alive, even when it delivers death and destruction on the scale that we're seeing, in the global south today. And when it works well, it soon turns to its opposite. Okay, those countries that were rising, part of the experience was a commodity boom, a boom of economies in the 21st century that are dependent on raw material exports, on commodity markets and so on, and to an unprecedented degree, very long periods of boom. Okay, so you have a country like Ghana, where I'm from. Okay, in 2011, fastest growing economy in the world, 13% or so. Today, it is completely tanked. Massive debt crisis. The currency has devalued almost by 80% in the last year. Inflation nudging 60%. Interest rates 30-40%. Redundancies left, right, and center. I'll come to what is being proposed as the reforms. Another so-called success story, Ethiopia, far more phenomenally successful than the case of Ghana, because from the years 2010 to 2019, in the decade after the global financial and economic crisis, more than China, more than any East Asian country, Ethiopia was the fastest growing economy in the world. Today, it is plunged into civil war. Its neoliberal, its project of state-managed neoliberalism has come to grief. A faction fight within the ruling class about which way forward has led to a civil war. 600,000 people dead. Nobody hears about it. All we hear is what NATO is doing, wants to do, and wants us to think about what is happening in Ukraine. And in any case, this process of that commodity dependency has wrought internal damage to the economies, to the society, the social fabric, to peoples in Africa itself. Because that extreme concentration on export-led growth through this process also meant the collapse, the accelerated collapse of agriculture, the accelerated collapse of manufacturing and industry, and so on. It is one of the reasons why Africa has been so vulnerable to the food crisis that has been one of the consequences of the Russian invasion of Kuwait. After all, these are supposed to be agricultural economies, agricultural society. They grow all the, whatever else is grown. But part of the reason also is also the monopolies that has emerged in the process of neoliberal capitalism in particular. So that we see that 4 companies dominate about 90% of world grain trade. And those 4 companies have not reduced production of wheat and essential grains. No one should believe the fact that, supplies have actually dwindled. They haven't. It is the capacity to exploit this crisis to jack up prices, which is the cause of the food and energy inflation, as you all know, as you all feel in your pockets and so on. But in the case of the global south, obviously, the consequences are devastating. In Africa alone, 80 million people driven into abject poverty this year alone. An additional 180 more million people facing chronic malnutrition. Yes, I know 11 million people in Britain are also, food deficient. In other words, look at us, you see your future. Okay. Now, comrades, it's not about a tale of woe. It is about the inability, the deep inability of the system to deliver anything but the type of thing that I'm describing, except for a few people. Because alongside this process has also meant an attack on rights, land grabs, dispossessions, kicking away union rights, and so on and so forth. And of course, it has been accompanied by the rise of the right in a variety of different forms. So in Africa, for example, we see that this is the front line today in terms of the fight against LGBT. Okay, we find that in Ghana, my country, there's a bill in Parliament, the stage of second reading. We have an MP here. You can correct me about the procedure. It's at the second reading stage. 1 minute, Jesus Christ. Okay, it's at the second stage of reading, which basically means that there's a fight on our hands. Comrades, we can't trust the ruling class in any of its forms. We do not require Kamala Harris to come to Africa, preach to us about LGBT rights. We do not require the German government to tell us about women's liberation. We do not require any of that. What we require is an escalation of what we see in terms of the fight back in Africa. The fishermen in South Africa joining up with environmental justice activists to stop oil exploration. The fishermen from West Africa on EU boats in the Indian Ocean, striking not simply for their wages, but for sustainability in terms of overfishing and so on. We've seen it time and again, all kinds of places. So we know where the fight will come from. What we see in Iran, for example, the women, life, and freedom, I'm stopping, and so on. The thing I want to end on is this. The politics that we need for that transformation is the politics that our tradition embodies. The politics of permanent revolution, where fighting for democratic rights moves over into fighting to change the entire structure and the ownership of the economy and so on and so forth. We see it in places like in Sudan. Real glimpses of that. In Sudan, many of you would have heard repeatedly, it's worth repeating, and I'll end on this point. In Sudan, we saw when electricity workers went on strike for wages, they occupied the power generation plant. What did they do? They turned off the power to the presidential palace, to the military barracks, and kept the supply for ordinary people going. In other words, not only can we strike to make our lives better, we know how to end war, we know how to end dictatorship. But the news from the front line in Sudan is this, that what is missing is precisely what we are here for. The idea that the Revolutionary Party is the vehicle that can carry struggles forward, the idea that the Revolutionary Party is the incubating point for building new institutions of working class unity across board and taking forward our capacity to fight. That is the lesson that I hope everybody who's been to Marxism has learned. It's a lesson that all of us will take back. It's a lesson which requires anybody not to live here without becoming a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. Thank you very much.
All right, a massive thank you to Gyechi for that. Our next speaker needs no introduction. You may have seen one of his many rants in the Irish Parliament going viral on TikTok. Richard Boyd Barrett is a member of the Irish Parliament with People Before Profit and the Socialist Workers Network. So a big welcome to Richard.
Well, I have to say it is very, very heartening to see the thousands of people who've turned up at the biggest Marxism that we've seen for many, many years. Members and non-members, thousands of them, to discuss the urgent need to change the world. And whereas in previous Marxisms and in previous years, we may have had to discuss, if you like, the terrifying, dangerous, alarming potentials of the system to wreak havoc on the lives of people across the world. We are now not talking about potentials, as Alex Kalilnikos's book has so well outlined. These are current realities that threaten the very existence of humanity, and where really the vast, vast majority of people across the world have nowhere to hide from the horrors that the system of capitalism is inflicting on their lives. Earlier this year, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, a group that were set up after the use of the nuclear weapons in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, set up to warn against the possibility of the future use of nuclear weapons, set the doomsday clock, as they described it, at 90 seconds to midnight. That was the closest these scientists have set that clock since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Closer, in fact, than they set it at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because they could see what anybody looking honestly at what is happening with the war in Ukraine and the military escalation of competition between NATO, Russia, and of course behind that, the escalating military conflict between the Western powers and China, and what that possibility summons up of the possibility of an exchange of nuclear weapons and essentially the destruction, if that were to happen, of the conditions which sustain human existence on the planet. And I think they're right. I think they're right. I don't think that's alarmist when you look at it. Of course, the Western powers who are jumping for joy at the chance of sort of justifying Western militarism claim that their intervention or their concern about Ukraine is for the rights of people to be to self-determination against what is undoubtedly a brutal imperialist invasion by Russia of their country. But if that was the real motive of NATO and the Western powers, don't you think they would be intervening on behalf of the Palestinians, who are every bit as much a victim of illegal occupation, of war crimes and crimes against humanity? But of course, they don't care about the Palestinians. They actively support and arm the regime that is doing that to the Palestinians,
because their concern in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and anywhere are the strategic interests of Western capitalist powers to expand spheres of influence, to steal resources, to control areas of the world. And that insane logic can lead us to disaster. I was reading, and sorry to repeat something I said at Alex's meeting earlier on, but I was reading Ireland's national broadcaster, where one of the lead articles today was about what's happening with the Arctic Circle, the melting of the polar ice caps, and the terrifying possibilities that is bringing in terms of global warming, the release of billions and billions of tons of stored carbon, but also terrifyingly pathogens that have been frozen in the permafrost of what they call zombie pathogens, of the Spanish flu, of tuberculosis, of all sorts of diseases and pathogens, which, if released, could wreak absolute chaos across the world. What are the major powers doing in the face of this terrifying situation? They are actually looking, they're fighting now with each other over access to the untapped oil and gas reserves that they believe are under the permafrost, and indeed gold and zinc and other minerals, and they are fighting with each other and refusing to cooperate, but rather trying to grab this. So literally fighting over the potential corpse of the planet and wanting to make it worse. And then, of course, you have the terrifying rise of the far right, which we've discussed here. And then you just have the immiseration of working class people with the cost of living crisis. Nothing inevitable about it, but driven by the profiteering of fossil fuel companies, energy companies, profiteering, exploiting the crisis in Ukraine to immiserate working class people across the world. Ireland is an absolute testimony to this. If you look at, on face value, it's one of the most successful economies in the world. We underwent 10 years of brutal austerity after the last financial crash, but now we are a success story, apparently. Profits have gone in the last 10 years from 70 billion euro a year to 300 billion euro this year. We have a budget surplus, which is projected to be 60 billion over the next few years, mostly thanks to the tax piracy and tax haven model of essentially allowing the big multinational corporations to avoid paying tax. But has that delivered anything for working class people in Ireland? Quite the opposite. With massive budget surpluses, full employment, record economic growth, we have the worst housing crisis in the history of the state, with the numbers of working families being driven into homelessness rising every single week. We have 1 million people on hospital waiting lists waiting for basic operations. And of course, faced with that, even in Ireland, tragically, the lack of political alternatives for this, we are seeing the first worrying rises of the far right. And in the face of that, what is the alternative, right? And really the question for us, I think, for the many who've come here, is a question of reform or revolution. Now, to me, it's self-evident that the idea of small, tinkering, incremental, gradualist change faced with these sort of existential crises is ridiculous. But if there's any doubt about it, just look at the experience across the world of Labour-style parties trying to manage this system or win change through Parliament. Everywhere their failure has actually given rise to the rise of the far right, because you cannot manage a system that is fundamentally dysfunctional and where the problems you're trying to solve are actually the result of the crazy competitive logic of competition for profit that drives this mad system. And Ireland, again, is such an example of that. We've had the Labour Party, who were elected on the back of the last crisis, have gone from about 30% to 2% today. 2% because of their betrayals of working class people. Interestingly, we're 4%, right? But we're still tiny in reality. But the big opposition party is Sinn Féin, and they are already lining up to do the same thing as the Labour Party. You may have seen the unbelievable spectacle of Sinn Féin leaders going to King Charles's coronation. When Joe Biden came to the country, rolling out the red carpet and hugging Joe Biden, the leader of the biggest imperialist power in the world, and their finance spokesperson meeting with business people and saying, don't worry, you've nothing to fear from Sinn Féin. Right? So this is where the logic of trying to manage the system or to win change through Parliament leads you to these sort of betrayals and compromises with the system. So the only alternative is the revolutionary alternative. The alternative is the people here leading the struggles and acting in solidarity with those who are fighting in Paris, in Palestine, in Sudan, the workers in colleges here going on strike. It is only from below, working class people standing with workers, standing with the oppressed of the world, that we have any chance of stopping this catastrophe and actually delivering a better future for us all.
Thank you, Richard. So we've nearly come to the end of our closing rally, but we can continue the discussions afterwards, because after this rally, we'll be heading to the Institute of Education bar. So do join us and also help us hit our minimum spend in the bar as well. Now, to introduce our final speaker, I'm going to bring in Amy Lever. And just to say, Amy is the Joint National Secretary of the Socialist Workers' Party.
Well, what a fantastic few days it's been. I hope everybody here has enjoyed Marxism Festival as much as me. Before I say anything else, though, there's some big thank yous that need to be said, because a lot of work goes into making Marxism Festival happen. There's too many people really to thank personally, but there are some people I do want to mention. The first is Monica Axon. Monica, people already clap, runs the creche. Couldn't happen without her. So thank you, Monica. And then there were the people in the culture tent, a big technical challenge. So a big thanks to them. And finally, the comrades who've worked all weekend, 4 days, giving up their time to check tickets, set up the rooms, make it all run smoothly. The team in the pink t-shirts. But look, not only do I hope you enjoyed Marxism, I hope we're all inspired, stronger, more fortified, because we face some very big battles. Class war is being waged in Britain, a war over who is going to pay for the crisis of capitalism. The soaring costs of gas, electricity, food and more have driven a desperate cost of living emergency. Millions of people living in an horrendous new normal of debt, hunger, fuel poverty. And now, to add to that pain and misery, rising interest rates mean we face an acute housing crisis. Record rent rises as landlords are going to squeeze tenants. Huge hikes in mortgage rates. We have to be clear that inflation and interest rate rises, they're not a natural phenomenon that there's no control over. They are the direct result of human action. And at every point, political and class decisions are being made by those who run the system, and their aim is to make workers pay. Now, perhaps you expect me to say that. I mean, after all, here I am, a revolutionary socialist speaking at the final rally of a festival called Marxism. But you know what? You don't have to take my word for it. Those at the top admit it themselves. You know, when the new inflation figures came out last week, Karen Ward, who works for JP Morgan, that's one of the biggest banks in the world, she called on Radio 4 for the Bank of England to create a recession, to create uncertainty and frailty. She said, and I quote, that when workers are a little less confident about their jobs, then they will think, oh, I won't push my boss for higher pay. Now, she is not a rogue banker. She's the key advisor to Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. But she is right. Raising interest rates is a deliberate policy to push the economy towards recession. Another chief economist said it requires more pain. But they don't mean pain for themselves. Oh, no, those at the top of society are doing very well. In Britain, the richest 50 families own £466 billion. That is more wealth than the entire bottom half of the whole population, 33 million of us. And their wealth has risen. Now, what they mean then is pain for us. And we have to be clear, inflation has not been caused by workers being paid too much. The problem is not that workers' wages are too high, they're actually too low. Health workers, teachers, posties, train drivers, Amazon, we should be paid more. So inflation has not been caused by a wage price spiral, it's been caused by the chaos of capitalism, driven by the crises of climate, war and COVID disrupting supplies and profiteering as those at the top seek to boost their profits. So we are up against class warriors for the rich and powerful, and that means more struggle is needed on our side. Now, we've had a year of strikes, the highest number of strikes in Britain for over 30 years, and that has been fantastic in many ways. Big, vibrant picket lines, rallies and protests. Strikes make clear who does the work in society. They show the power workers have when we take action collectively. But strikes are good, but we need victories. And it should be a good time to fight, because in any battle, you should always take advantage of your enemy's weakness. And right now, the Tories are in a mess, riven by division and squabbles. Rishi Sunak, he was meant to be the safe pair of hands after the catastrophe of Liz Truss. He looks pretty fragile at the moment. But no matter how weak the Tories are, we can't just wait for them to lose a general election. And we certainly can't place our hopes for change on a Labour victory. Keir Starmer has gone out of his way to prove that he is a loyal defender of the system. He's launched a war, not on the Tories and the bosses, but on strikers, on pickets, socialists, Corbyn supporters in his own party. So we want the Tories out, but Starmer can't be the solution. The truth is, though, our class does have the potential to win overpay and a lot more. But to win victories, we're going to have to go beyond celebrating strikes and putting forward a strategy to win. And that can mean arguments. I think we have to be honest and say that the strike strategy from the leaderships of the trade unions has been far too limited. Occasional and episodic strike days, long gaps between action, cancelling strikes for the mere promise of talks. It's not been enough to force the bosses and the Tories to back down. And instead, union leaders have accepted and pushed poor and below inflation offers. From the beginning of the strikes, we in the SWP, we've thrown ourselves into supporting them and building solidarity. But we've also argued that we have to go beyond the strategy of the trade union leaderships. We need more coordination between unions, but crucially for escalation, more strikes, more often. And we've argued that any pay offer less than inflation is a pay cut and should be rejected. And we also need to see more democratic control by strikers themselves, beginning to organise independently of the trade union officials, rebuilding the traditions of mass meetings and strike committees. And that's why the Workers' Summit on Saturday, the 23rd of September is so important. It's a crucial place for discussion and organising. It's going to be a grassroots event initiated by Strike Map, NHS Workers Say No, branches of the National Education Union, the Teachers Union, being backed now by over 30 different unions. It is an opportunity for everyone who's frustrated at the limits that have been imposed by the trade union leaderships to come together and discuss. So put that date in your diary, raise it in your union branch, pass the motion of support, invite strikers, other trade unions and activists. Let's make it the biggest possible forum to discuss how the strikes can go forward. But look, the Tories may be weak, but they're also very vicious and nasty. Alongside their assault on working class living standards, they've launched a new racist offensive, targeting refugees and migrants, desperate people fleeing war, climate catastrophe, repression. The Tories even compete amongst themselves about just how racist and cruel they can be. Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats is not enough for Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She wants to stop all migration. They may have been stopped for now to deport people to Rwanda, but now they want to cage refugees on overcrowded prison barges. These are the same policies that led to hundreds of refugees drowning off the coast of Greece last month. Let's call it what it is: mass murder. Because it wasn't an accident. It was the result of Fortress Europe that has turned the Mediterranean into a cemetery. Like I say, 500 refugees left to drown, their calls for help ignored, and then the authorities lied and covered it up. Contrast that with how the 5 billionaires on the Titan submarine were treated. They weren't fleeing horror, they were looking for kicks and adventure. And when they got into difficulty, there's a multi-million-pound rescue effort, every sinew strained, and headline news around the world. It tells you a lot about capitalism. If you're rich, your life matters. If you're poor, it doesn't. So as the Tories scapegoat, blame, and stoke up hatred, we have to be clear. Refugees are not to blame for the cost of living crisis. They're not to blame for inflation or the housing crisis. We are against all immigration controls, and we say open the borders, all refugees welcome. Because it's not just the Tories, the Nazis, the fascists, the far right, they can sniff an opportunity to grow. You know, when Sunak says stop the boats, it gives them ammunition. And that's why we're seeing nearly every week in Britain, fascists and far-right groups, Patriotic Alternative, Hitler lookalike Alec Yerbury, attempting to mobilise on the streets, to whip up hatred, target refugees housed in hotels, going further, now attacking drag queens, reading stories to children. It is absolutely right that we mobilise to stop them. And we should be clear, there is no such thing as legitimate concerns about refugees. Even if they're not led by fascists, all demonstrations against refugees are racist and should be opposed. And we have to stop the far right now while they're relatively small. Because look around Europe, Italy, France, Austria, Sweden, the far right continuing to gain votes, legitimacy and influence. So we will build those mass mobilisations to stop them. And it's why in the SWP, we're part of Stand Up to Racism, a broad campaign with other activists, because it's a challenge for every area. If the far right come to your area, are you ready to confront them with the numbers needed? And the Stand Up to Racism conference, which is an international conference on Saturday, the 21st of October, is central to this. Again, put it in your diary, because it's going to be a chance for us all to come together and learn from each other about how we organise against them. But you know, we have to do something more if we want to stop the fascists and racists for good. Because we've knocked them back before, from the National Front to the British National Party to the English Defence League. They keep coming back. Different far-right groups, same ideas of hatred. And that's because capitalism itself breeds racism and creates the terrain for them to grow. From its inception, capitalism, with its roots in the brutal, barbaric transatlantic slave trade, has used racism to divide and rule. It's institutionalized into the system. Look at the police. 3 decades after the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence, the truth is still coming out. And what's changed? 25 years ago, the Macpherson report said the police were institutionally racist. This year, the Casey report says they're racist, but not only that, sexist, misogynistic, and homophobic as well. And that's why it's not, we have to oppose the far right, but we have to go beyond. We have to challenge that whole system to uproot racism and all oppression completely. And we do face a deep and multifaceted crisis of capitalism. The cost of living emergency, war, imperialism, climate catastrophe, pandemics, but they're not all separate. They flow from that same dynamic at the heart of the system, the drive for profit and competition. So we've heard people talk here about the system hurtling us towards devastating climate change. Even though we know the solution is simple, stop burning fossil fuels, but they can't break from that carbon-fueled economic system, and all the pledges are meaningless. And people have spoken here about that system of imperialist competition fueling the grinding war in Ukraine, destruction and human suffering on a massive scale that could even erupt into nuclear war. We're clear Russia should get out and NATO needs to stop escalating it. Billions of pounds of weaponry poured into the region by the US, by Britain, by other NATO countries seeking to extend their own power and influence. So those at the top have no solutions. They can't break from the system. They're locked into competition and the drive for profit, so they defend it with even more repression. Imprisoning climate activists, attacking trans rights, increasing police powers, jailing women like Carla Foster for having an abortion, passing laws to make it even harder to strike and protest. Not just in Britain, but across the world, an authoritarian hardening as governments and states try and protect their crisis rat system. But if the root cause is capitalism, then we have to talk about alternatives. And our vision for change is completely different from that of Starmer and the Labour Party. We don't want to just elect someone to manage capitalism. We want to get rid of it completely. And that means revolutionary change and socialist transformation. Socialism is about a world without class division, a world where a tiny minority can no longer impose their rule through violence and repression, a world where we produce the things we need using resources in a sustainable way on the basis of what we actually need rather than profit, a world of deeper and real democracy, where those who do the work get a real say in how things are run. And that is going to take a revolution, because those at the top won't give up their power and privilege. But when we talk about revolution, we're not talking about a coup or a minority imposing its will. We're talking about millions of people taking over the running of society. And we've seen a glimpse of the potential power to do that when workers go on strike, when they stop work, when profits that run the system don't get made. But not only can workers bring society to a standstill, they have the power to build a different world. But to fight for a different world, we need a different sort of organisation. Now, the Socialist Workers' Party brings together all those who want to see change. Our focus isn't Parliament and getting ourselves elected. Neither is it just talking about socialism. We seek to intervene in every struggle and be part of it, not just as activists, but fighting for a strategy that can help take it forward to win. And that's why you will see us on the teachers' picket lines next week, standing with striking junior doctors, workers at the universities like Brighton, St Mungo's and Amazon, building solidarity but arguing for strikes. Our members will be at the forefront of opposing the fascists, from Erskine in Scotland to Dorset in the south, from Llanelli in Wales to Lincoln, fighting for unity against division. And we'll be standing next week with our union banners on Trans Pride with a clear message that trans women are women, trans men are men. And it's why we'll be fighting for a woman's right to choose, whether that's to have an abortion or the right to wear the hijab. It's why we're on every protest in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. We don't think it's anti-Semitic to be anti-Zionist and against the Israeli state. It's why we'll be protesting against the Tory party conference in Manchester on Sunday, the 1st of October, taking the struggle to them. Our members will be doing all this and more in every local area. But the SWP is more than an amalgam of campaigns. It's not just a series of slogans. I hope this weekend you've engaged with our ideas and the history of the movement, because we want to challenge the whole system of capitalism and build an alternative to the blood, filth, violence and poverty of the system, and fighting for a world without exploitation, racism, oppression and war. And that requires socialist organisation. Because the truth is, we're entering a more intense phase of crisis. This is only the start. Crisis is inherent in capitalism. There is no technical tweak that can resolve it. But as the Russian revolutionary Lenin said, there is no crisis. Capitalism can't get out of it if workers are prepared to pay the price. I think instead of paying the price, we have to prepare for the battles that are already raging and that are to come. Because resistance is breaking out, from strikes here to the struggles in the global south, to the rage on the streets of France and more. But the outcome of those struggles is not predetermined. What we do, the strategies we fight for, it will make a difference. And that's why, if you are not already a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, we want to ask you to join us. Join us in those battles to come, to help take them forward to win, fighting for revolutionary ideas and for a very different world. Join the SWP tonight before you leave.
Thank you to Amy, and a big thanks to all five of our speakers for what was quite a powerful and inspiring closing rally. So I'm going to invite up Lorna McKinnon, just to say, Lorna McKinnon is an organizer for the Socialist Workers' Party and based in Edinburgh, is also a musician, and is actually the person who's responsible for all the culture stuff that people have enjoyed throughout the festival, from the tent to the gigs. So
we're going to finish the way we normally do with the Internationality. Comrades, I invite you to stand. I'm going to kick you off. We're going to start in the right key.